Hello. How's everyone doing, huh? Gang all here. Gang all here as we speak. How's it going, guys? Okay. Candaris Ordo, hey. How's it going, my friend? Mohammed Abu Safia. Yo. Hi, Charlotte. Hello. What's up, dude? You having fun at work, Charlotte? All right. So I figured we'd just do another stream today on a Saturday. Granted, I had one. We did a stream, I think, what was it? Saturday? Thursday? Yeah, I think Thursday. So, but the reason why I'm doing this is typically I'll keep a little bit more days in between. Um, but I'm gonna be gone for like a week, so this is the last stream for about a week. So yeah, Charlotte, I have to shit. I'm gonna poop on the floor. You go do that. You go do that, Charlotte. You have fun. But yeah. So I'm gonna be gone for like a week, so that kind of sucks. I'm gonna have to I like to keep you guys updated. Not specifically just you guys in chat, but just in general, right? This video that I'm doing has been taking quite a long time, so it's more of a video essay that I have to be more creative with it than I would, just trying to put a text into video form. Ironically, you would think that's harder. You would think that's harder to translate a text into video form. It's not actually. It's harder making a video about a certain subject and creating your own sort of narrative within that. That's harder, if you ask me. Even though more YouTubers do that, I'm a little bit unique in the sense that I like to kind of translate things in a descriptive context. I don't think a lot of people, a lot of philosophy channels do that. I do, or I try to, and so but that's easier, honestly. But we're doing a little bit of a video essay around just the concept of happiness, a little bit of late capitalism, some postmodernism, and just talking about happiness, man. We're as a concept, and I promise you, it's not one dimensional at all. And part of the reason why I'm talking about happiness is because the discussion around happiness is really, really bad. There's videos on happiness that you can find on YouTube, anywhere, and I believe the video creator thinks they're being pretty critical, and in some contexts they are, sure. What I usually find with happiness videos is it's like, look, we live in capitalism, we're exploited, we can't afford anything, thus we're unhappy. And look, those are all legitimate reasons why one would be unhappy. But happiness, in my mind, is so beyond that, right? It's elsewhere. And I'm definitely going to talk about that in this video. I think that there is it sounds a little bit elitist when you say this, like, oh, they think they're being critical, but they're not. But no, like, that's a look. I think that's sort of the essence of taking things in a perspective of psychoanalysis, right? Is that psychoanalysis tries to kind of level those illusions down, and it shows the illusions that you partake in too, right? When you critique people or people for doing things or that doing things that they think they're doing but they're really not, you are often subject to that as well. So I try to I try to use my language carefully when I say that, because it can come off very elitist, and that's not fair, because we're all in this together, I suppose. And but I think that's what happens on YouTube. People make videos, they think they're being critical. Hey, thank you so much, David. Thank you. How's it going, my friend? I appreciate that a lot. David, you're always so generous, man. Appreciate you beyond words. But yeah, so again, and they are being critical, right? When you're talking about material orders, when you're talking about capitalism, that is critical. Like, I'll be real. Like, let's take a step back. Let's get off our high horses, right? That is pretty critical. I just don't think it's critical enough in some ways. It's something that I don't think materiality can contend with. Can only contend with things such as happiness. But yeah, it's a little bit so. I'm also separating. There's a couple things. So people, I can already hear, and I kind of foresaw this. So in the script, I sort of addressed this, that like, I'm not really talking about mental health in this video. I'm not going to. Mental health and happiness, in my mind, are quite different. I don't want to spoil the video, my views on happiness. So I'll let the little happiness video play out for you guys. I'm not going to tell you exactly what I think about happiness, I'm not going to go into detail exactly. We can talk about it afterwards on stream. We'll definitely do that. But mental health and happiness are very different. And I think they're related, but they are still different enough that I'm not going to address mental health. So yeah. Would love to see you dissing on mindfulness. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, dude. I there's a lot of things. There's a lot of coping mechanisms, right? Regarding how to navigate this late capitalism, right? And in my mind, people like Herbert Marcuse, Mark Fisher talk about the radical individualization of things such as psychology. Mark Fisher less so on that end. Marcuse in Eros and Civilization talks about, like, look, these things, how to analyze the psyche, has turned into a radically individual endeavor. Further, there's a little, and he goes into detail about sort of like the individuality of something like therapy, where he's like, look, there's more going on here than just you. It's actually kind of crazy. I'm a little bit surprised at the time of like neo-Freudians, right? The 40s and 50s. I'm a little bit surprised there weren't more people like Marcuse. We think about it, it is so embedded that in psychology, the idea that like, there's this, that like psychology isn't something radically internal is pretty crazy. And because it's so clear that there are so many more things to psychology and what affects your psyche than the external order around you, the world around you. And that's so, I think, just truthful in itself in some ways. And the discipline turned into something rigorous in the sense that it just focused on the individual. Marcuse gets at the sort of the core of this in Eros and Civilization, and I like it a lot. And he starts to pick at how we approach therapy and forms of, I guess, healing. Mark Fisher does the best job at elaborating on this in a modern context, but Marcuse is starting to get to those real. He's starting to figure. He's like, look, this is not. We're not good, and he calls them neo-Freudians. We wouldn't call them those, but because everyone at this point in psychology are neo-Freudians, but he calls them neo-Freudians at this point. At writing that book, so yeah, medical conditions are medicalized in a context within, again, parameters of capitalism. And he talks about this in Capitalist Realism, where we just cannot, as a society, step outside of those bounds to prescribe a mental health issue due to social relations, economic orders. It's just never, we've never done that. And it's a little bit surprising, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's still a bit surprising to me that that's not quite as popular, especially at the time of Marcuse. I'm a little bit shocked that not enough people really picked up on that. I mean, I'm shocked and I'm not, right? But yeah. I'll read chat. Let's do, before we start getting into chat, we are going to be listening to Peter Bark's Ambient Singles Series Volume 1. some nice ambient cassette music. So we're gonna do that real quick. We'll pop this bad boy in, and then we will continue. All right. What's up, Mr. Epoch? Hello. How's it going, my friend? Just chilling. Just Saturday. It's a good day. I gotta leave. I gotta go to California tomorrow, and I'm not really happy about it. I gotta get on an airplane and go. I'm not. So that kind of sucks, but yeah, it's all right. What's your advice on talking to like really religious Christians who exercise their belief, not necessarily conservative, but on a personal level? Gotcha. Who got really into the whole God loves you, I have to learn this and that, and now it's tried Feuerbach but didn't convince. That's interesting. That's yeah, I'll answer that. I see Artine. How's it going, Artine? Guys, if you haven't checked out Artine's sick. His channel, he makes a lot of really cool videos. But yeah, that is so true. Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud were the big three, but they seem to be analyzed so independently. Eros and Civilization was great. It was a really... Eros and Civilization was quite underrated. Everyone talks about One-Dimensional Man. I haven't read One-Dimensional Man, so I can't tell, but Eros and Civilization was very, very significant. Back to the question, though, the religious question. That's hard. I mean, someone like Feuerbach, you know, would be interesting, because Feuerbach, in some ways, listen, language is important in how you convey these things. When you talk about something like philosophy of religion, I would say like, hey, you know, to my Christian friend, or have you guys ever read Philosophy of Religion, whatever? And then you could probably introduce them into people like Hegel. Hegel has quite a bit of commentary on Christianity. I just think philosophers who talk about God in a different context is nice. Spinoza is another one. But yeah, that's hard. I don't know, man. That's a very difficult question to answer. How do you convey certain ideas outside the scope of fucking Christianity, or like Western Christianity, to people? I don't know, man. I don't know. You can't be overly political. I know that. That's definitely one thing. I think something like philosophy will help prime people's mind. I think in general, philosophy is a better answer for a lot of political questions and how to convey potential political futures to people. It's not going to be set in the same discourse and language that we typically see in practical politics. It's not. It's too alienating. It's far too alienating. Even though I partake in that discourse all the time as a political science student or major. But we're at a standstill there. And at least I think. And I don't think it's good enough to talk within the same framework of language. I think we gotta do some thinking there. I think we gotta do a little bit of change there. I would like to see... The problem is the important framework and how we approach things is developed on the ground. Look, I'm a materialist in this sense. So how we approach politics, you know, we approach things online. There's a reinforcement here. Online shapes the digital sphere, the internet, Twitter, social media, shapes sort of how we approach politics, right? They've turned it, you know, you get into certain sides on social media, it's very political, or they think they're political. Talking about politics isn't politics, really. But I think a lot of how we truly do politics is just reflective of organizations and the sort of physical language and how we go about things, right? Of organizing, of protest. And I would like to see organizations... I was going to say, is like, I want to see organizations change their initial symbolism, but a lot of organizations that are actually are political, and they have good goals. So for example, when they have good goals, they do have pretty independent symbolism. It's not tethered to any real ideological tonality, which is really nice. I think that's super necessary. Here's an example. Casey, there's an activist organization in Kansas City. They've gotten national coverage because they've been doing a lot of really good stuff in Kansas City. Casey Tenants. is the organization, and they're pretty much a housing for all organization. They do a lot of good work and kind of exposing a lot of really shitty landlords in the Midwest area around KC, and it's great. And they're really successful, but they don't have any really ideological symbolism in the sense that it's not tethered to some political faction or anything, and I think that works. I think if you want to do Marxism, this is another thing. How do we convey radical ideas and implement things? How do we push our society on the ground towards things like socialism? Well, first, it's not going to come from the same framework that we see with like hammer and sickles. Like, semiotics, in my mind, is super important. The symbols, the interaction within language, that is the first thing that people approach things with. Hammer and sickle doesn't cut it anymore. Call the same language, it creates a barrier. It's an alienating barrier to people who, let's be real, are just completely brainwashed in a really capitalist system such as ours, you know? And we need to adapt to that, but we don't do that. It feels too good to there's a libidinal response to identify with that symbolism, and that is the question. How do we get past that in some ways? But I'll answer some other questions. This is so true. So identity politics versus traditional or non-traditional class-based social welfare-based politics. Yeah. Aw, no more hammer and sickles. Yeah. I mean, look. You know, I can already hear people getting mad. People. That's gonna piss people off. People are tethered to their symbolisms. They have an attachment to those things, and it's understandable, right? It really is. It's not like there's nothing wrong with the hammer and sickle. The idea that it is vilified innately in a Western context sucks, right? But we would be wise to understand this and try to figure something out. Yeah, no more Che Guevara teachers. Yeah, probably not. Abandon that shit. Abandon it. I've abandoned my child. I've abandoned my boy. Abandon your goddamn hammer and sickles. Fuck. No, I think it would be more helpful than what we imagine. I think changing the scope of interaction with sort of political practice is important, I think. So, question, what's your take on veganism? That's a good question. I was a vegan for over a year, just a little over a year. I think when you look at it, like, look, veganism in my mind is something very moral. I think that vegans are doing something very noble when they do that, right? The fucking meat industry and really the animal agriculture industry is insanely horrible. Like it's terrible. Even people like, I'm not saying people like Sam Harris aren't like, you know, they're not, he's not terrible, but I think even when people like Sam Harris who seem radically, I think Sam Harris strikes me as someone really, he doesn't give a fuck about like emancipation or a society or like he doesn't care about the general well-being of a group of people. I don't think. I don't get that. Maybe he does. I don't know. But Sam Harris has talked about this a lot too. He's like, God, this is one of the most horrible things that like this agricultural industry is just insane. It's one of the most immoral things that we've seen, and I agree with him with this. I think it's terrible. The problem is, this isn't the problem with veganism. I think vegans have a very bad idea on how to approach this. Most of the discourse around veganism is hyper individualistic. They don't approach industry. They don't make arguments on the ends of industry most of the time. They certainly do. They definitely do. They'll protest and certain places and yeah. But I think a lot of the interaction with vegans, it's like it's your responsibility to not eat meat. It's your responsibility to change this. And in my mind, that's just so self-defeating. It's not an individual problem. It's an industrial problem. It's something to do with industry, not individuals. So I think the framework in which a lot of vegans approach veganism and how to convey veganism to people, it's a little they're quite bad at it a lot of the times. But no, veganism in my mind is an incredibly moral thing. I think that if you are a vegan, I think you're doing something moral, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's basically we can fix this by consuming more vegan products. That's part of it too, right? And it's something. Look, the best way to describe veganism is like capitalist realism in some ways. But I don't think that's philosophy. Hey, how's it going, dude? Yeah, fuck the hammer and sickle. It ain't gonna emancipate anyone. Yeah, so you know, I don't think that's philosophy. I think I talked to you, dude. I think we were talking on you messaged me on Instagram. We were talking about this. You said you were a libertarian for a while, right? And then you came around after reading Mark Fisher, stuff like that, to understand that libertarianism is quite fucking stupid. So in my mind, I think things like hammer and sickles, things that are seen as rabidly ideological, up front in their tonality, right? Everything's ideological, right? Everything. Some of those ideological things in the world have they have a sort of smoke screen around it, and in my mind, and it's elastic. In my mind, that's even more ideological. But nonetheless, yeah, I think this alienates potential people. It stops a lot of people from realizing shit. It's sort of like there's this, and in my mind, if anything, this is how like capitalism is so good at combating anti-capitalist endeavors, is that it innately instills a sort of fear into you about anything else, and it instills fear in prior existing symbolisms, political symbolisms of the past, that being fucking hammer sickles associated with Marxism. All of these things, these languages are just innately, to most Western people, are just kind of bad, or they're like, ooh, that's scary, or that's nonetheless best case scenario, the most average person, oh, that's like extreme, right? It's not necessarily bad. That's like, oh, that's a little bit, I don't know if I'm quite there. That's what happens. That's what happens in my mind. You know? I think that's exactly what happens. And in my mind, to stick with that same symbolism is just, it's not helpful at this point in time, I don't think. I think that, and it's not to say that adopting new symbolism is going to fix everything. Fuck no. It's just that I think we're dealing with multiple variables here. We're dealing with multiple different variables, and one variable to getting people to try and look past these systems of just pure capitalism is symbolism. Right. Hammer and sickle simply gives image to the objective need for alliance between. So there's nothing extreme about it. Yeah, well, that's the point, right? There is nothing extreme about the hammer and sickle. But we've had the Cold War. People don't see that. So simply gives image to the objective need for alliance. But it doesn't do that to Western people. It doesn't. If anything, it gives an image of like authoritarianism, whatever that means, right? That's what it ultimately does, right? What it does for us, what it actually is supposed to convey, there is nothing objective about symbolism, if you ask me. There really isn't. It simply gives image to the objective need for an alliance between... Oh, sorry, I'm rereading that. It gives objective need for the alliance between industrial workers and the agricultural workers, yeah. I mean, sure, definitely. That's the historical context behind that, but a lot of people don't think in that regard. Sadly. We've had the whole Red Scare. We've had the Cold War. I think we'd be wise to adapt to that. My camera's a little bit out of focus. Yo, pick me back up. This thing is not wanting to... There we go. Do you think that the USA... Hi, Orhan Namazov, pronouncing that correctly? Do you think the USA is an oligarchy? Absolutely. Absolutely. David Lee, politics is authoritarian. It absolutely is. People who whine about authoritarianism are fundamentally not serious about what the actual game... But no. You can't start from that position at all. What something is and in reality isn't what is conveyed to normal people or to a lot of different people, right? People to simply react and say that, oh, people who whine about authoritarianism are not serious and brush them aside, terrible fucking mistake. Terrible mistake. It doesn't matter. Sure, politics absolutely is authoritarian. And people who do whine about authoritarianism in some ways do not understand the scope. But I think for a lot of people, authoritarianism is a very real fear of a history around state just basic oppression, or a you know, like there's plenty of things to fear when you look back in history about, you know, certain governments, stuff like that, right? Like we live in this sort of fearful sort of state. So authoritarianism is sort of one of those things, and whether that is from the state or the private sector, it doesn't matter. These people, we as Western subjects, feel that. And we should be serious about understanding people's sort of innate sympathies and how they interact with this world. We don't think about those things. It doesn't matter what things are objectively in some senses whenever it comes to political outreach. Right? Like Engels talks about authoritarianism and stuff like that, absolutely. But we need to understand how a lot of other people think. We brush that aside. In my mind, that's extremely arrogant. The private sector, right? But you're explaining this to me, David. You're explaining this to me. You're explaining this to people in chat who read theory and probably understand the nature of political economy. We're talking to a lot of people. We're talking about a lot of people who don't quite have that same experience. They haven't learned about things like that. They don't understand those things per se. To say that is an extension of state under capitalist society, people scratch their heads at that. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Man, I'm 100% sure that socialism will never take hold in the West. I don't think it... well, I mean, I think so. Like, it depends on what you mean by socialism. There's a lot of different socialisms. I think a form of it, yeah. I don't think capitalism as we know it can quite... I don't think... I'm a Marxist in that sense. I don't think it's I don't think it's as viable long term as what we think it is. It'll change. It might be around for a long, long time, though. Third world revolts. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that will happen per se, but yeah. We should also think about how Bakunin was cool, Marxism was power, vacuum, and Engels could probably be around for... Hello from Iran. Thanks for your awesome videos. Thank you, my friend. I am more than happy to provide. I appreciate all you guys being here. Will you make an episode about the Book of Soul informed by... Yeah, Lukix. Yeah. I think we'll explore a lot of these people, right? We will get to them. It'll be some time. It'll definitely be some time, but we'll get there. There's a number of people. Whitehead is another person that I want to explore on the channel, but it'll be some time. Yeah, we won't live to see the end of capitalism. Not at all. I don't even think our grandchildren will. Definitely not. I don't think so. Exactly. Moza puts this in really... I think, Moza, you put that in easy language. It's like the swastika, right? The swastika, I believe Native Americans actually used swastikas for certain symbols and stuff like that. Hitler stole that image, or it's associated with fascism or National Socialism, and we associate that with bad things, right? There's an innate reaction to that. And people do that with the hammer and sickle. It doesn't mean that the hammer and sickle's bad at all. But people think that. So, would be good to try and redo, try to change some of our symbolism, our artistic endeavors, right? But that's not what it's about for a lot of people. It's a what's the best way to describe it? It's a jouissance of group politics and symbolism. There's too much. There's too much there. We like it too much, right? There's a libidinal sort of effect from it. I agree. Let's bring back the swastika. I don't know about that. If anything, this is a discussion about abandoning prior symbolism because of its baggage. I definitely want to bring that back up. But, Moza, yeah, Marxism isn't necessarily communism or socialism, right? I've actually kind of had trouble explaining that to some people. Socialism and communism actually, like, those ideas actually existed before Marx. For sure. Yeah, Marxism is sort of it's a theory of, it's multiple theories of dialectical materialism, of historical materialism, of theory, but it's a set of theories that aren't necessarily tied to just social and economic orders. Yeah. Educating the 90% or so who don't know about politics, philosophy, economic psychology is the most important in these tasks. So I think this really depends on what you mean by educating, David. I think that sometimes I think we get the wrong idea. I think that it's not good enough. So this is something that I've ran into. It's not good enough in my mind to tell people stuff is bad and explain correctly why it's bad. It's not good enough to do that. And we have that sort of impetus in today's world. Like, we think that telling people that the United States is ran by a handful of billionaires who reinforce an entire political order in Washington, it's not good enough to say that, if you ask me. It doesn't, and in my mind, I don't think, it's just not good enough to educate people on the actual really correct and objective woes in the country. That we think that that's good enough, and I don't think it is. I think that it goes a little bit more than that. I think that, I think modes of thought are very important. I think teaching people how to concretely think in a little bit more of a logical sense. Like, this is, again, we're in continental philosophy and theory, but I think having a framework of some forms of analytical philosophy is very important, right? Understanding fallacies and thinking concretely in some ways, understanding what dialectics means, how to think about the world in different respects. We don't teach people modes of thought. We teach people, we sort of try to convey what people should already think. And we elaborate on this with explaining to them that, X and Y is bad and we should fix it, X and Y. Explaining how their lives are affected. So truly, I'm more cynical than that. I really don't even think that's good enough. Sure, explaining how their lives are affected, sure. And this is important, right? I can still, I think that that's still a good thing to do. We have to be careful about how we do it, though, right? The form in which you do things and try to explain things is very important. It alienates or it educates. In my mind, this is why, some of the most radical political things you can do is not talking about politics in some ways. I talked to Pills about this when he was on, and I wish he would talk about this more, because I've kind of stumbled on similar conclusions, and he, I think, has too, but I think he, in his smarter brain than me, he was able to concretely think about that and put that into language better than me. That, it's not good enough to go and talk about why things are bad, how it affects their lives, and it's not to say that you shouldn't necessarily do that, right? But we have to understand the form in which we are doing things, how people may interpret it, how do they trust your, right? Because we say things objectively, and people can't think of that as separate from individuals. Even people, we can't do that as leftists, right? So if someone says something correct and they're on the right, a lot of the times people just, there's an innate, they throw that out. And I mean, we all kind of do this sometimes, right? So say, for example, Hitler says something correct about something, we'd be a lot less likely to at least concede to that idea in some respects. Of course, some of you, including me, or some of you might be like, I don't know, man. I don't know, dude. So we attach things to people. We attach things to the language in which it is employed. There are so many variables here that I think that our approach to even explaining how we should explain how it's affecting people is it's not good. I think one of the biggest problems with that is politics as we know it online. Online politics, guys, is one of the worst endeavors. Like, political content creators, in my mind, are some of the worst. And I'm talking like the fucking worst at conveying to and reaching out to a lot of people who are fairly new to politics. It really is. I think that what you see with online politics, and this goes everywhere, it posits a side. Which side do you got to choose? Do I choose this side, and there's multiple different sides? What language do they employ? Which one fits me? It's you're shopping for an ideology, and nothing gets to the bottom of things on YouTube politics and Twitter politics. In my mind, it's not good at what it's trying to do at all. And then when this gets pointed out in a lot of ways, there is a reaction to this. As you say to someone like, hey, it's, I don't know, I struggle. I have a lot of, I struggle bad with how a lot of politics goes online. Like, it's really not good. And I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, but I even think what's supposed to be oppositional to conveying political information, right? Media, like independent media. I find left-wing independent media sometimes among the worst compared, like, all right, it's a little bit of a working thesis, not really. I mean, kind of thought this for a while, but in my mind, there are multiple functions in which the media sort of operates within, right? Right? Media does convey information, but it also entertains. In my mind, when we get down to the nitty-gritty, media, doesn't matter if it's information, doesn't matter if it's journalism, its main function is entertainment. Like, again, it's not that that's the only function, right? But its main function is to actually entertain. The minute that entertainment goes away, that enjoyment, a form of enjoyment, whether that's like, like, yeah, if that enjoyment is sort of stripped away from that, it's gone, right? It's gone. And so, in my mind, mainstream media outlets have known this forever, right? Right? We've had CNN, we have MSNBC, we have Fox, right? From the 50s to the early 2000s onwards, right? They've had sort of a monopoly. And I think our response on the left is to simply, in some ways, just replace them. That's it. That's actually been the totality of our response. Just replace them and then tell people the correct things, right? In my mind, that is so futile. It is so unbelievably futile and wrong that what happens is we don't even understand. We don't even try to combat. We don't even try to combat the form in which politics as entertainment happens, right? And can we escape politics as entertainment? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not. But I think we should probably try. It's very hard to... I think that we should try to get away from that. And I think one thing to do... Listen, I don't have a political channel. I don't have... listen, but here's the thing. If I was doing journalism and I was doing these sort of things, I would leave. It would be hard to make a living doing this because this is so radically different from how other people do stuff. I would keep commentary to a fucking minimum. I would keep it to a minimum. There's too many commentators in some ways. I'm doing it right now. I get it. Granted, I'm in a kind of like a non-political framework in how I'm commenting on this. But we have too many fucking priests, especially in the political sphere. And I think that would be my first step. Try to sort of get away from the mixing up like, because it's like a marketplace of takes, right? One person, Kyle Kalinske has this take and I like it more, so I'm going to watch more Kyle Kalinske. This person has this take, and I'm going to consume these opinions, these political opinions. In my mind, I don't know exactly how to escape this, but in my mind, that is a very real problem. Yeah, media mostly has become an end in itself, Frederick. That's correct. It's an end in of itself, and I think on the left we're like, look, we just need to replace this. Everything will be good if we'll get the truth out, right? I love that too. We can speak the truth when corporations won't control what we can say. I fucking love this. I love it so much because it's like, all right, fine. You're independent from corporations, but you're not actually independent. Like, you're not. I'm sorry. There's some group, if you're reliant on money, you're reliant on an audience, you're going to reflect in some capacity what that audience wants. And I don't care who you are. There are content creators that will say, no, I'm independent. I have, I have a Patreon full of, I only take money from my patrons and shit. And they'll write they'll sit high on that pedestal. Like, no one can influence what I say. Bull fucking shit. You're just being influenced by different people. Now, is that influence preferable? Would you rather be influenced by a group of people? Probably, but it's not to say that you're not being influenced, right? Yeah, so I think that's another way to put it too, is that's pundits are the news now. But yeah, David, very good, Epoch. Yeah, these are good questions. I think about this quite a bit. I think we really need to radically reinterpret a little bit how we approach conveying these ideas, how we communicate with people, and oh my lord, I think that I think independent left media is not. It is in so many ways. It is doing so many things wrong. Is it good that we have an internet to facilitate more independent voices? Kind of, maybe. But people are like, we need more left voices. No. You're looking at this all wrong. Like, if the idea is that we need more people saying more things of the same things that people are already saying, or just different within some context, I think that we're looking at this wrong. I think we need to try to actually change the scope in which journalism fucking works, or media works. And it's not good enough to just simply replace corporations, right? And that seems to be the totality of the approach. Had to get away for a second, just heard your answer about the Christianity thing. It's just so hard not to get political. It is, sure. Well, also too, I think we need to remember. Look, I'm actually coming to the conclusion. One of the most radically political thing that you could do, what I mean is prime people towards newer political understandings of things, is not talking about politics in some ways. It's talking about art. It's talking about music. It's talking about life. Talking about it's talking about things beyond the scope of politics. Because when you get beyond the scope of politics, then you start to actually potentially get to a point where you can change sort of politics, if that makes sense. Staying within these set parameters and how we discuss politics, practical politics, not fucking good enough. It's not. It truly is just like, guys, I see all the time. Like, let's see. I'm not subscribed to a lot of these channels anymore, but I'll see on YouTube, like, oh, X and Y person shit on Andrew Yang, or like Twitter drama, or like between, and like in my mind, that is so alienating. Oh my God, you're not doing politics when you do that. That's not politics. Politics, that's elsewhere. That's on the ground, or that's being exchanged in Washington. You're not doing politics, and you're not helping when you do sensational clickbait. It doesn't matter. I don't give a fuck who you are. I don't give a fuck what your takes are. The framework in which you are operating is already wrong, and that's that. Above all, you're relying on their platforms. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So how do you approach left journalism, smash monopolies? Well, yeah, so that, I mean, again, that's sort of the question. How do you approach journalism? I don't exactly know. I think that what we can do is at least try to pin down what's probably not good right now. So we haven't even exactly pinned down about what's not working. I think what's not working is we're seeing an entire industry of sort of independent media voices, and that's all they are. They're just voices. They're just talking about things. They're just talking about politics, right? And they're giving their personal takes. I gotta switch the tape. I'll continue this real quick. And I think that what they're doing is, again, they're just talking about politics, but it's not doing politics. It's not actually really changing anything. You're not doing anything radical by pointing out that just capitalism's bad and, you know, or pointing out that like, I think that entire framework's wrong. Now, to say that information, right, about what's going on, news and sorts, is that necessary in some ways? Yeah, sure. I think so. What to do is a little bit hard, though, to say. There's a lot of just commentary around the news. I think that's like 80% of media. It's like, and journalism, what is just commentary around what's going on. That's it. And I think there needs to be more focus on modes of interpretation. Again, there should be more focus on philosophy. I really think that. I really do. And I know some people are like, oh, philosophy, fucking, you know, like, they'll quote Marx, philosophers forever have just interpreted the world. The point is to change it. Okay. I don't think interpreting and changing, sorry, Marx, I don't think it's exactly different. Sorry, it's not exactly, they're not entirely separate. I think that teaching people modes of thoughts, or when I say teaching, giving people the ability to potentially learn about modes of thinking, and certain ideas that span a lot further than what they realize, right? So, like, for example, people don't even realize, like, our entire social institution, like, our entire institutions, political institutions, are so reflective of, like, 1600s fucking English philosophy. Philosophy, in so many ways, is actually very radical, right? So, like, guys, like, again, we're Lockeans, we're pretty big early Enlightenment liberals in how we live, and there's been so much philosophy after that people don't exactly internalize or concretely understand, and in my mind, that's where actual change, the possibility of change, could happen, is when people start contending with these things, right? But contending with the commentary of politics, not good enough. Attack the dominant ideology at its roots, attack its philosophy. Yeah, in some ways, creating or sharing art, talking about the human condition outside of politics is a good way to, 100%. The most radical thing, the most radically political thing you can do, it doesn't involve talking about politics. Not to say that you shouldn't talk about politics, right? I don't think so. Some people, I remember Pills. I think Pills was talking about is like, that's why I don't talk about politics, and that's fine. I just don't know if I quite have that conclusion. Everything else, though, I 100% agree with. And he was talking about some things in that stream that it's been after that talk, I was able to concretely pin some things down with that. Pills is fucking sick. I'm such a fan. I've only been able to get one person in 20 years to look beyond the simulacrum. Yeah, it's hard, man, and that one person was already aware of a lot of things. It's hard. There's a lot of speed bumps. That's why I think things like linguistics and semiotics are incredibly interesting to me. How to approach communication. How to avoid those speed bumps when you say certain things that instills a reaction in someone, or I don't know. These are tough questions. Would you compare political commentary to feeding the homeless, like giving them they feel good in the movement or moment, but it isn't addressing the? Yeah, I mean, Sure, in some ways, I suppose. Yeah. It's I almost think feeding the homeless, though, is more radical than political commentary, though, right? Like, I actually think feeding homeless people is probably more beneficial. You're helping more people by feeding. You're helping a person more directly than just talking about politics, for sure. You don't actually. You think that, like, I think political commentators think that they are changing things by talking about these things, right? They don't. They're changing some things within the parameters set, right? Like, they're not going outside those parameters. They're talking about things within set structures, and you can change your opinions within those set structures, but the point is to change those structures, not your thinking between them, right? That's a good way to visualize it, or not. Don't you think if they taught philosophy and critical thinking in school, more people will then question the very... Absolutely. I've talked about this a lot. Yes, 100%. And I don't think that's philosophy. You said parents would be pissed if they taught philosophy in school. They would be. Teaching logic in schools would piss people off. Big time. Big time. I don't think it would solve everything, right? Maybe not. But I think it's something that we need to take very seriously. Hey, David, thank you so much for the $3. I appreciate that so much, dude. You're always so generous. It helps immensely. It's tough being a little independent content creator out here, you know? David, seriously, you make these streams. I appreciate you so much. I'd put it like that. We need a unified education that crosses the borders of single... Yeah, otherwise we are stuck in postmodern schizophrenia. It needs narratives. I don't know. So what would you... that's a little bit vague. I don't know if I quite... Frederick, I quite understand that. Talk philosophy first, politics afterwards. I think so. Yeah, I really do. I really do. But people think that philosophy is some, like, elitist thing. It's not. Or they think intellectualism is elitism. They like, oh my god, I see this a lot. I see like smaller, like, bread tube commentators like, oh, these people, they like these intellectuals and shit think they're doing stuff, and I'm like, do you not understand that, like, intellectualism is not synonymous with, like, elitism, right? Intellectualism is looking at things critically. That's all that it is. Like, really, like, when you get down to the essence of it, just a critical way at approaching something. And in my mind, that's exactly what we should be doing. Hey, but also, here's another thing. Mao said the same thing. Mao thought the same thing, that how do we make people intellectuals? Based when Mao says it, it's lib shit whenever I say it. Or anyone else says it, for that matter. Anyone who isn't that important. I'm trying to get others to support too. Hey, that's very nice of you. Very nice of you. Of course, all of this is free, but, you know. I mean, the connection of different areas of thought. For example, math, physics, chemistry, and biology as one subject, not... Yeah. Well, again, this is something that's really nice about philosophy, is it is good. It is good at... philosophy's good at sort of encompassing multiple fields and connecting them in some respects, right? It allows you to make conclusions that cross certain academic fields and mediums. True, but I think for most people it comes off as elitism. Yeah, so again, this is where language and approach, and in some ways trust is important too. Right? I also think people are a little bit smarter than what we think. We think of people as idiots, and they're not. We think of people as blind. They're blind in a different way, not in the ways that we think. We think that they just hear shit and they accept it. No, it's the opposite. They're cynical. If anything, they reject narratives and then believe in another narrative, a separate narrative, and they think they're being critical, and that's not the same as just believing whatever you hear. And so they're skeptical about what people say, including you. And so it's important not to come off as cookie cutter. It's important to be authentic and be you and be real and build relationships with people when you're talking about that. Yeah, sheeple. Yeah, but people think that, man. It's important to know. That is a good point. It does come off as elitism. It can. You gotta be authentic with your approach. And I think people can feel that. I think people can tell when people are being authentic or not, or when they're just bullshitting. There's those people that bullshit a lot. And I think if you come off authentic, and say things at the right times, or I think that's pretty powerful. Yeah, people are smarter than we think. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something else, like I've talked about this a couple times. I talked about this a couple times. I talk about how I don't consider myself like a lot of people who know about philosophy or theory. They consider themselves philosophers or theorists. They have their own ideas, and I consider myself more of a historian of intellectual history. It's just like understanding the ideas and relations in more of a historical context. But I do have some ideas, and some of my ideas that I would write about in the future, if possible, if I could possibly get published in the late future. Maybe my YouTube channel will allow me to do that. I don't know. I would talk about a little bit of I think Marx's idea of the rural and urban divide and its ideological tonality is still quite relevant today. Like if you guys read the German ideology, Marx talks about how sort of the urban and rural divide from the beginning of like the end of feudalism was starting to become about, and it creates really different ideological tones, and that's still so relevant today. Like it's kind of crazy in my mind how relevant that is, and there's some more ideas. So I've spent a lot of time in So I grew up, again, I talk about this quite frequently. I grew up in a bit of a suburban, ruralish area of Missouri. Some of my good friends grew up in the middle of fucking nowhere, and my mom grew up in a very small town, and family lived there. And so I have this dual, and a lot of people have this, I have this dual relationship with like the city and like the ruralish parts of America, and then on top of it, even more rural. My father owned some land in southern Missouri and spent a lot of time as a kid in just that area. Maybe didn't interact with a ton of people in that area. Very small town. The closest town to it was very, very small. There's a lake there. But people are very different in a lot of ways, and it's not different in a bad way, necessarily. Are most of the people there Trumpers, and are they like really, really conservative and kind of bigoted in probably a lot of ways? Are they have really, really bad views in the world? Yeah. But we look at these people as somewhat primitive, and that's not it. I think one of the biggest markings, here's sort of my take, some of the biggest markings of the rural and urban divide is, what's the word? It's, I don't know how I would describe this, but sort of human, right? These people, like, who, like rural people, in my mind, are way more, like, human in some ways, like, whatever the fuck that means, but they're more human than urbanites. They're more, like, there is a sort of, I had language for this. I was able to explain this very well. I don't know why I'm losing my train of thought here. When you go into like the rural areas of America, You talk to these people, or you sort of like understand how they live in a much more, it starts with an S. Someone help me. Chat, help me. Sentimental. That's it. That's exactly it. Rural people are far more sentimental, I've noticed, than a lot of urban people. Like, and I don't know how much more, right? But I've noticed that I think there's this sentimentalism that really separates the urban and rural divide. So here's another contradiction and paradox here. That a lot of people who live in cities think fairly progressively. They're not very bigoted. They're, in a lot of ways, they're more mentally and sort of politically progressive in a lot of ways. But they live, and they're sort of forced to, but they live like neoliberals. Rural people do not. Rural people support sort of a neoliberal sort of political order, but they aren't neoliberals. In reality, the real neoliberals are people who live in cities, even if they are mentally progressive. So in this context, I don't give a fuck what you think. I give a fuck what you do. Rural people live. They don't live like neoliberals. Urban people do. I don't know. I've noticed that there's not a lot of conversation on that in a larger, maybe sociological context. So I think that's something I'd be interested in writing about and exploring more. But those are the only things that I've kind of thought about writing in my head. And I know that's a dangerous thing to talk about, what you would write, because people steal your work. I know academics are crazy paranoid about that. I don't really give a fuck. Go steal my ideas. I don't fucking care. Opinions on the worship of society and society? Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah. I mean, that's there could be a little bit of a worship apparatus that ironically isn't scientific, you know? I've seen many conservatives justify not wearing masks because of faulty studies on their effectiveness. Instead, just wearing masks on principle, they say, yeah. Well, that is the thing. There's yeah. I believe that's precisely the appeal of Mark Fisher has. Yes, he and his texts feel authentic. Absolutely. Mark Fisher felt what he thought in a lot of ways, deeply. And it's not that, like, you know, authors feel what they think, right? Like, that's, you know, but he does a really good job at conveying that feeling. I think Mark Fisher was, he strikes me as someone who's very, very emotional, or that was a side of him that, not to romanticize the man, after he died, this happens to everyone when they die, but I think Mark Fisher was definitely sort of I think he was a rare sentimentalist in some ways. I think he felt deeply what he thought. I think a lot of us are a bit more separate. I am, for sure. Sometimes learning about theory and stuff like that, especially more dismal stuff, can be a little bit depressing. It can be hard on my mental health. That's something I've kind of had to deal with a little bit. I have to combat. I got to be careful not to get in my head too much when I'm reading stuff. And get into a dismal state. That can happen real quick. I think this man thrust himself in that reality. Really, really right there. Some people do philosophy and theory joyously, and I'm not exactly one of those people. I think Mark Fisher definitely was not. Not. But what about society as a whole does it really mean? Ideological concept that ends up being hypothetical doctrine to rule? I mean, in some ways. There is no monopoly on what society means. So, I mean, what do you mean by live like neoliberals? Radically efficient. Right? So, it doesn't matter whether that's fun, whether there's a concrete rhythm that I find with urbanites. There's a productivity, even though their ideology and like what in their, again, depends on what your definition of ideology is. Let's just say what they think is something that, like, no, like we shouldn't be productive. People should be paid more. They're not like pro neoliberal work, but they live in a sort of way like that, right? They live like neoliberals, in some respects. There's I want to say like maybe a business ontology, right? I noticed there's a lot of like, Mark Fisher's view of business ontology does a lot to explain that. Hey.
By the way, thanks for all the great work.
Thank you so much, Frederick. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Fills my heart. I appreciate that beyond words. Super kind. So yeah, to answer that a little bit more descriptively, like there's just I think that it's just simply the way that they live, the rhythm and how they approach things. You know, the busy work career life is something that is hard to escape when you're in the city, and while you can't get away from it in the country, you live in a more slowed down pace, a little bit, just, I think, if that makes sense. It's a vague, I use neoliberal in that regard as a little bit vague, but certainly they live more in that in a sort of like robotic sense, maybe. Yeah, so that's another thing. Do you mean like how urbanites try to? So sometimes, yeah, I think that's, in some ways, yeah, there is a sort of, well, there's a lot of, I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of, I find actually, people in the city are a bit more actually social than people in the suburbs. I find people in the suburbs are actually probably more antisocial in some ways. But yeah, there is still a radical focus on career, on an efficiency of thought and how to do things. Intellect, like, in my mind, that sort of just, it's a loose view of neoliberalism, right? It's not neoliberalism, right? But I think it sort of lives like what a neoliberal would want, if that makes sense. Stardew Valley has the urban rural divide is a big theme. I have not. I've heard Stardew Valley is great. Yeah, I think efficiency, the marketization of their world. I think that's it, right? So Mark Fisher talks about business ontology. Your passions, your endeavor can't like you can't escape those things, right? They are way quicker to become sort of a business endeavor. I think with a lot of people like that, it's just that, and it's not to say that they like this, right? It's not to say that, you know, these people aren't skeptical of, you know, the order around us, but they still live. I think they still live in a way that a good old fashioned neoliberal would like to see, right? I think like rural people are a bit more sentimental. They're a little bit too sentimental for the classic what someone would want in that regard, right? In a business capacity, right? They're a bit too human, if that makes sense. Not to say that like city people. These are all really vague concepts. I hope I don't confuse. This is like I said, these are working theses or whatever that I've kind of noticed. What do I mean by idiot? Yeah, commodification of pretty much everything. That's right. Everything's shared online, right? There's I noticed this, like, guys, a lot of my perspective of this comes from, so I live, like, right outside the city. So I grew up farther out, pretty, like, 40 minutes outside of Kansas City. And, about 45 minutes. And now I live, like, 10. So I don't live in, well, fuck, I'm trying to dox myself, goddammit. I'm just trying to explain my proximity. Yeah, ignore that. I'm not telling you where the fuck I live. I do live in the Kansas City area. But I climb at I go climbing. Me and my brother both climb. And there's a climbing gym there, and it's like in the city. Fuck, I'm fucking giving my goddamn life away on YouTube. Whatever, I'm such a small YouTuber. Fuck you guys, no one's gonna stalk me. Anyways, I notice a lot of the people there, they live in the surrounding area, and it's like in the city, like very much downtown. And everyone there, a lot of people record themselves climbing, like all the time. People like, hey, get a video of me climbing this, like sending this route or something like that. Like everyone records everything, everything seems so like, I don't know. Like there is a commodification of that. There's a commodification of of your leisure time, if that makes sense to me, right? There's a efficiency, a productivity to what you're doing. It's not good enough to enjoy what you are doing, if that makes sense. It's yeah, there has to be something more. So Tim Stump posers. So I don't even know if I consider them posers, right? It's just like it's not, you know, in their mind I think that people enjoy seeing this, you know, they want to see that. Yeah, so I think urban life drives people to be both cosmopolitan and ultra individualistic. Yeah, in some ways, there's a radical identity, right, to how a lot of urbanites live in a way, and it comes in the form of sharing everything you do on social media, stuff like that. There's another thing. So the gym that I go to, I follow on Instagram, right? The gym that I go to, I follow on Instagram, their account, and they share, so people will like record themselves climbing or do whatever, and they'll tag the gym, and the gym, for probably advertising purposes, will share their Instagram story or whatever, their post. And I noticed there's a select few accounts, and they're like fitness accounts, and of course they're very like, again, they live in the city. They're like fitness accounts, like you can do this and this and that. You got to work to like this and this and this and that. And it's like there's a commodification of like it's priest shit. And it's like, I don't know. I find it to be pretty, like, in my mind, it gives off the form of of a careerist, overly efficient, robotic mode of being. There's no way to just enjoy what you are doing, right? For a lot of them, not all. People are people. People are different. But I noticed that motherfuckers who live in the fucking country, dude, people are content sitting on their fucking porch. Like, this is the thing. People who really live in the country, you'll drive by they'll be fucking, and it's in the middle of nowhere. They'll be sitting on their porch. They just sit on their porch. In my mind, what is more fucking human than that? That is like the antithesis of neoliberalism. They're sitting on their fucking porch, right? Like, I know this sounds kind of like, oh, okay, what's significant about that? In my mind, that's pretty significant. We live in an age of information and radical stimulation. And then there's these group of people who are able to step outside of their house and just kind of be. And we think of these people as like we often have this very elitist form. No, sitting on the porch is the quintessential urban Indian. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what are they doing when they do that? They're just there. They're just happy to be there, right? You can't, like, that's pretty rare. Yeah, they're just vibing. Like, I noticed that, like, so, for example, again, my dad owns some land in southern Missouri. It's about 2 hours away from here. And on the way there, you know, it's already a small town, but on the way there, you're in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of rural houses, they're actually quite close to, like, main roads. And I remember driving by there as a little kid and seeing people just sitting on their porch. They just chill. Or they were just outside, just chilling. And to me, even as a kid, I noticed that. So yeah, when I visited my dad in LA, a friend of his was just sitting outside of his home. Yeah, and people do that in the city, right? But like that, people do that, right? It's not to say, but it's like, to me, there's something different going on there, right? There's not a lot going on. If anything, it's like, rather than enjoying the stimulation, which is what urbanites do, they enjoy the lack of stimulation. And in my mind, that's something very innately human that, yeah. Sounds like Brett. Sounds like you just don't hustle. Hashtag hustle. To be honest, yeah. But you guys know what I mean by that. If that makes sense, that there is sort of a way that urbanites live in a little bit more of a neoliberal sense. Yet at the same time, most of these people who live in cities, there's a paradox here. They don't think necessarily like their politics, what they would want politically, isn't neoliberalism. I think a lot of people think that's kind of inhumane, and there's a lot of bad things about neoliberalism. On the opposite end, there are people who live in the country who are happy to give their vote or support people politically who are very radical neoliberals, but they don't live like neoliberals. They don't live hyper efficiently, right? If that makes sense. I think that's sort of the one paradox that I've thought about that I've never seen people really talk about in a sort of sociological or theoretical context. I don't know. Sounds like a sort of a Zizek thing but yeah. Celios Epoch, what was the last idea that really clicked with you? That's a good question. That's hard. Again, I had that conversation with Pills, and I think the last idea that clicked with me is, I think that something that's kind of changed my thinking is that the most radical politics is doesn't involve talking about politics. I think that's sort of it. That the best way to communicate to ground yourself with individuals in a way that could affect politics is not talking about politics. I think that's something that was an idea that has recently clicked with me, and I didn't always think that way. Yeah, always pursuing to maximize utility of every single personal hobby and just vibing. That's right. I mean, that is it, right? And like I do it. I did it, right? In some ways, look at what look at what I'm doing right now. This is my job now. I love this. This is my passion. This is my favorite thing to do, is to talk about this stuff, to stream, to make videos. And I've commodified it in a way, right? I kind of have to live. But it shows you the sort of, well, the grasp of things like that, you know? In some ways, there's a tragedy in that, right? Yeah, I'm a little bit more alienated. I think you're a little bit more alienated when you make hobbies a potential career or a job, right? If that makes sense. You have to distance yourself from, in some ways, your immediate wants or your concerns with theory and philosophy. This is why I get a little bit angry. This is why I get a little bit annoyed when like bread tubers will sit on their fucking, or like or sorry, not like bread tubers, but like political YouTubers will sit on their throne, on their high horse, and they claim moral superiority, or that they can't be influenced because they don't take money from corporations. Like, there's some fucking politician. Like, the fuck? Like, get off. Like, get over yourself. You refusing to take money is not the same as some politician, the very few politicians who don't take corporate money. You are in a whole different sphere. Like, get over your fucking ego shit. Anyways, where was I going with this? I think that, oh, where was I? Yeah, so, like, this is where you are not, like, not influenced by certain things, right? Like, in some ways, I find alienation to be relevant even in a YouTube context, right? You have to make things within certain things, and in that sense, I'm not subject to a lack of influence. I'm very much influenced with what I do, right? So are these political commentators. I just think that there's a little bit of a lack of depth with how things happen and how things go on. Yeah, it's a bit of a door-nose attitude. Work while you work and rest when you rest. I think, and so Mark Fisher talks about that too. Let's talk about Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher talks about how there's a tragedy sort of in this post-Fordism economics, right? Where you never escape work, right? It's one thing to be exploited for 8 hours of your day, and then you're away from your work, and then you're not exploited from that work, right, for a couple hours and then you have 2 days off. It's not like that in a lot of ways anymore. It's not. You're working all the time. You don't have time off in some ways. It's kind of common for some careers. A lot of bread tube is disturbingly circle jerky. Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god. Political commentary is circle jerky. They say the same fucking things, guys, and they think they're doing something. But I think, but then again, it's not entirely. Like, I'll be real. It's not entirely. I'm not gonna say it's not entirely their fault. They kind of have to. It's an industry, but here's the thing: they're not honest about it. That's the other thing. Like, look, you can do these things, but we should be honest. We should try to have as few illusions as possible. I think that's should be a goal. And then they just deny it altogether, right? They deny that there's an illusion to begin with. So, yeah, I think I've been so disillusioned by I've been so disillusioned by how politics operates online and on YouTube. It's so bad. What should I be reading from Heidegger? I've been slogging through Hegel and Marx, and I've been hearing that I ought to read Heidegger, Land, and Fisher. It's making me want to shoot myself. No, don't do that. Well, I mean, what do you guys think? Being in Time is probably like, it was Heidegger's like first thing. Heidegger is certainly very important to 20th century philosophy. I mean, like, so important. Yeah, I think Being in Time, probably it. You know, my favorite thing from Heidegger is the question concerning technology, but I think he's got some other works about language and sort of kind of like quasi-linguistics and poetry and stuff like that that could be interesting, but you know, at least under Fordism, you could walk away. That is exactly right. Exactly right. You could walk away, you could go, you know, it's not to say things were great, but yeah, you get to go home, and that's that. Today, it's not exactly so. When we talk about people sitting on porches, how old are those people? Old, I think. I don't know. Not all the time. Middle age. When I was younger, granted, I was on a road, like, you know, like I was I was in the backseat of my dad's truck and looking out a window. I couldn't tell exactly the age, right? But yeah. I don't think I remember only seeing old people do that. Wait, do people actually read philosophy? They don't just do it? That's unfortunate. Question concerning technology feels a little bit critical theory-ish to me, honestly. In my mind. Granted, he gets into a lot of stuff from Being in Time as well, but yeah, Moza, you're right. That is their goal. Feed into what their audience wants to hear, yet they deny that's what they do. And I do it. I have to. You have to. They have to in some ways, right? I'm just saying we shouldn't have any real illusions about that. Right? They'll deny that happens altogether. It's very dishonest. But it works. It works. People love that shit. People love moral hierarchy. They do. Leftists love moral hierarchy. They love a narrative, a good story about someone. They love a romantic story about someone being an intellectual or being a maverick or fucking like, yeah, it's so egotistical. Oh, fuck, camera keeps coming out of focus. I gotta get. That was something cool about. I have a really nice camera. I like my camera. Looks good. My webcam that I had also looked pretty good for the money. It was really nice. It was the Logitech. I think it was like probably the best webcam you can buy, but it wasn't that expensive. What was nice about it is it didn't have like a focus effect, and so if you moved around, it wasn't a big deal. Wait, so Gen Xers not just relax in urban America? What? I mean, what? Wait, is that what you think that I mean? No, that's absolutely not my point. No, people relax. They relax in different ways. Like in my mind, that's so different than just sort of being content with sitting and doing nothing. Fuck, man, not many Gen Xers do. Or, oh, sorry. Wait, I don't know if I understand that correctly. No, yeah, no. No, I noticed that I'm much more skeptical about urbanites or being able to just go sit outside of a porch in the middle of nowhere and actually be content with what they're doing. Yeah, I'm a little bit. I don't think that's as common. That's I wouldn't imagine that's a radical view. But yeah, not many people I know would do that. There's a wait. So isn't it just the same? What, like, you think video games or scrolling on your phone or that stuff is the same as sitting on a porch? No, that's not the same at all. That's totally different. Yeah, yeah, that's Zorb. Relaxing by raping your serotonin receptors or dopamine receptors. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's kind of, yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's not really relaxing, if you ask me. I don't ever really relax. I would struggle to do that. Yeah, video games absolutely are work. Absolutely, video games are work. It's pleasureful work, but it is. Okay. I didn't know if you were disagreeing or dawdling or you just didn't understand. But yeah, it's there's a certain like heavy difference there. I think in some ways anxiety is fueled by overstimulation in a lot of ways. I think that's why when people are stressed out with work, it's not. I think that we sometimes there is stress, right? That's real. I think sometimes that we stress is also like an overstimulation of sorts. It's too much of something, and anxiety disorders can be very much linked to that. There's not a lot of you can't just be. That's why I think living in the world that we live in, it's you don't want to be. That's the whole goal. I think that's the whole neoliberal order. Being, if that makes sense, relaxing in the sense of just sitting on a porch, that is not desirable. Absolutely not. You are wasting your life away. When you're really not, right? But that is what. But in my mind, that is the most human thing. I just like. There will always be people who do that, I think, in the future. It's just there's going to be less and less, I think, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the result or the consequence of neoliberalism is, but I just noticed that is like, in my mind, that is an activity that precedes neoliberalism in some ways. And maybe everything we do precedes neoliberalism. It does. But like, it just feels, it feels very antithetical to our current order. Then I was saying about urban India is true. People here just relax and interact with their immediate communities and neighbors. Yeah, I mean that could totally be true. Totally. I know little about India, but yeah, I imagine that around the world it's very different. I read a thing. I read one of the happiest places to be in the world is, I think, it's like a fishing community in Indonesia or something like that. It was it may have been Indonesia. It was in Oceania or wherever. And they didn't make a lot of money they lived in relatively like wooden. They lived off the beach. They lived in like like not huts, but like very not more modern, sophisticated housing. It would be primitive in our context. They're modern people. I think they probably have internet. They probably have communication, stuff like that. But what they do, their life is they just fish. They just go fish. I think most days of the week. They go catch fish, and then once they're done, they meet with other people in their immediate community. They go cook dinner, and they just hang out on the beach, and that's what they do. And I think it was an article from like an anthropologist talking about it, and they're one of the most happy groups of people in the world, if you can measure that. So I find that interesting. They don't make much money. They don't have a lot, but yeah. Yeah, best way to be a rebel is to do nothing at all in some ways. Absolutely, dude. Yeah. I think that's what I made I was thinking about something the other day. Um um I was thinking about that the other day. One of the really good things about Marxism is that it does sort of get away from a potential repeated nature of just thinking about things. Marxism kind of helps break down those pacified barriers, and you do things. Yet on the opposite end, something else happens, where there is no reflection. What happens sometimes with a lot of Marxists is they are ironically extremely conservative in a lot of ways. And they hate hearing that. They absolutely hate hearing that. That is the one thing. Don't you ever tell a Marxist that they are kind of conservative, that their approach is a bit conservative, that doesn't change a lot. And in my mind, that kind of probably stems from a philosophy of doing rather than primarily focuses on doing. But again, this is just a contradiction. There's good and bad things about this, right? It's not all bad. And yeah. I think that, and this is why you find a lot of Marxist-Leninists. A lot of people develop their political views from organizations that they're a part of, right? I think that this is pretty common. And then they adhere to those organizational political standards. And there's not a lot of time for reflection. There's not a lot of time for that in some ways. And so what happens is you kind of turn into a weird sort of quasi-conservatism, if that makes sense. Not necessarily like you're conservative compared to an entire political order of Enlightenment liberalism, but in that sense you are progressive, but that even within those boundaries are really narrow, if you ask me, right? If we're gauging what's conservative off of like already like really, really old institutions, like our political institutions reflect Enlightenment, like early Enlightenment English philosophy, like those are really narrow parameters to gauge those things. And so I think there needs to be change, a lot more change than what there really is. And I think Marxism ironically struggles with that. I know Zizek has pointed that out as well. All right. Epoch, are there any commentators that you really enjoy? The political commentator that I enjoy died. His name is Michael Brooks. Sadly, he was the best out of them all. Hands down. Hands down. He was the best political commentator, I think. I don't think I like every other political commentator compared to, but he didn't just like, he actually was kind of a more critical thinker than other political commentators. Yeah, Michael Brooks is great. I really like Ben Burgess. Ben is really good too. Yeah, Ben's good. Ben isn't just a political commentator, but he certainly does do that. But I found Michael Brooks to be, like, as a political commentator, he was the best. He was critical. Um, I th- yeah, I think he also understood very clearly and talked about it. The problem with like an industry of political commentary too. He was like the only one, and he wasn't scared to give up his. He wasn't scared to. He had some balls on him, man. He he critiqued the things that he did, right, or like the form in which he operated within, right. He was a political commentator, but he talked about how bad a lot of it is, right. Like he talked about. I think there was one of the clips that came circulating around was how a lot of political commentary. I think he was referring to. I think it was Jimmy Dore. This is like before, like oddly, this is years ago. I think a lot of people who dislike Jimmy Dore now, it's from a lot of more recent things. But I think there was something Michael Brooks was talking about that he doesn't like with, and it's not just Jimmy Dore, but he was referring to him, was that a lot of it is very uncritical. They think that they're being critical, but it's not critical. And what happens is there's sort of a inverse reaction where, again, you're just doing the same things over and over and over, and your political project turns into catharsis, just raw catharsis. It's just release. It's just, that's it. Like there's not a lot of critical things, and he said he's like, it's a good hustle. I remember the clips explicitly. He said he was like, it's a good hustle, but it doesn't do anything. You're not really doing what you think you're doing. And ironically, I don't know if Michael Brooks read a lot of theory, but in my mind, that's someone who thinks beyond just the scope of politics and the immediate structures at bay. And that's rare for a political commentator. That is so rare. Yeah, I'm a little paranoid, but I'm a little creeped out by Michael Brooks' death. He was too young. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, shit, you think he was like murdered or something? I hope not. But I mean, yeah, it was weird. I don't even know why. How exactly did he die? Was it a stroke? I don't even know exactly. His book Against the Web was good. I never read that. I need to read it. I know it was from I know Zero Books published it. I think Michael Brooks is very formally educated in world politics. Yeah, he like, guys, I truly, like, he threw a clot, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Stelios, isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting? There, people don't talk about this. Marx and Engels didn't really talk exactly about what communism would look like in a lot of ways. Like you go through their text, they're very not descriptive about that. Socialism can be a lot of different things really, really quick. Can posit a lot of different ideas. There is a sort of vague attitude towards those things, and it's like, we don't think about those things until after. We just think about doing revolution, and in my mind, that's not a good idea, as I've said numerous times on here. Michael Brooks is a loss for us all. He absolutely was. I really like Michael Brooks. I'm not saying that because he's, because he's dead or anything. I actually say that because he was one of the very few people I could listen to, and really, in a political context, I could relate. There's a lot of people. Also, there's a lot of other political commentators who fucking, like, after he died, I noticed they are like the exact opposite of Michael Brooks and how he approached political commentary. Like, I'm talking polar opposite, and I'm surprised that they were like as sad as they were about. Well, sorry, that might sound really harsh. I'm just surprised because a lot of people, they're like, "Oh man, Michael Brooks is the best," but they don't talk about politics in the same context as him. Like, they don't, like, in my mind, a lot of these people are very uncritical about things. They just do shit. They just talk about shit. They're not looking at things very descriptively. In my mind, I'm like, God, I'm like, you missed the whole point of you missed the whole point of what he talked about a lot. That kind of makes me sad. Brooks and Graeber died within 3 months of each other. I think yeah. Okay, so someone asked, who is your favorite all-time philosopher? This will piss people off because they're like, oh, he just articulates on stuff. But I'm gonna say probably Mark Fisher. I'm serious. Like, and the reason I say that is because like Mark Fisher isn't just like a philosopher. He puts these complex ideas into really easy language, and in my mind, that is so important. And for that, I almost think Mark Fisher is among my favorite. Because I think Mark Fisher, what he does there, rather than exactly coming up with he does come up with some really unique ideas that people don't talk about, but people are like, oh, he just like talks about Jameson. And he does. But he talks about Jameson in a really easy way to understand. In my mind, that's super important. Like very, very important. But I would just say that, like, vaguely. It's hard to pin who your favorite philosopher is, but I'd just say, like, on top of everything, it's just I really appreciate that approach. So guys, I think that is it for today. We were about almost a 2-hour stream. I'm probably gonna head on out of here. Just wanted to say again, I'll be gone for about a week. I would like to set up a stream Friday. I'll be gone in California for a fucking week. It's gonna suck. I don't want to leave. I don't like leaving home. I'm a homebody. I won't stream for a little bit, but right as I get back, we'll do another stream. As always, give the same spiel at the end of the streams. If any of you guys want to support, you get some perks, some exclusive access to some videos. You can vote on future videos. You get all of these streams in VOD form on Patreon, and in the YouTube section. The join button down below. If any of you guys want to support, it keeps all of this alive. I couldn't do it without you guys. Other than that too, if you guys want to bookmark my Amazon link through the chat, you should probably find it. Make Jeff Bezos give me his money. Bookmark this link. Yeah, feel free to bookmark the Amazon link, and if you guys buy anything on there, gives me some percentage back, and it's free for you guys. Hopefully, if you guys do want to support the channel on Patreon and the YouTube join button, I can offer you guys enough perks, and hopefully make it worth it to you guys. Helps keep all this free as well. So, thank you guys. I appreciate all you guys so much. I'm gonna head on out of here. I always love doing these streams. We'll be back, I think, Friday. So next Friday, I will see you guys.